Thank you very much, artists, and what a joy to be with you. This is one of those moments where sometimes in Arkansas we used to say, everything that needs to be said has been said, but not everybody has said it yet. So that's why I get to come and say a few things here this afternoon. What a delight to have so many elected officials here, and it is an incredible tribute to the Farm Bureau of Mississippi that virtually every elected official of high note came this afternoon to personally look you in the eye and thank you for the job that you do in helping to promote the policies that make Mississippi a better state. They all had nice things to say about Mike. They know that they better. Every politician I know is scared to death of messing around with the Farm Bureau. And quite frankly, they ought to be, and that's a tribute to the sound policies that Farm Bureau has put in place. In your case, for 100 years. Folks, that's a big deal. I mean, let's roll this back. 1922, when the Farm Bureau of Mississippi was created, Warren G. Harding was president. And Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden were in their first terms in Congress. So just think about that. I want to tell artists how grateful I was to get an introduction today. I don't get them much anymore. I used to. These days, I go to places to speak. You know what I get? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sarah's dad. And that's it. That's how I'm known. People say, what did you do in Sarah's campaign? I said, well, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I was a senior advisor in her campaign. That sounds pretty important. What is it that you did? I said, well, senior advisor, I'm a senior citizen now, and I'm babysitting her kids a lot because she's out on the trail. And I advise them, hey, it's time for you guys to go to bed. So therefore, that's what a senior advisor does. People got to know my daughter when she was at the White House, and I would always get this question, I still get it. How did Sarah get to be so tough? I would say, have you ever met her mother? Notice I didn't say that with her mother in the room. I don't do that very often. The truth is she had two older brothers. Our daughter Sarah, the youngest of our three children, the only girl that we had. And because she had two older brothers, all of you that are here today and you had older brothers, I probably don't have to tell you that older brothers don't tend to be really nice and sweet and kind to their baby sisters. And they weren't to her. They were mean. And I mean, they were mean. One day they superglued her fingers together when she was about 2. That required a trip to the emergency room so that they could pull them apart. Another time they gave her a big glass of mud and told her it was a chocolate milkshake. They really did these things and a whole lot more. And not long after that, that young lady decided that if she was going to survive, she was going to have to stand up for herself and fight back, and boy, did she ever learn how. And I have no doubt about her capacity to do the job of governor. Sean Hannity especially is always just needling me about, well, you know, you were a pretty good governor, but your daughter's going to be much better. I think he thinks it will unsettle me a little bit. The truth is, I really hope she will be. Nothing would thrill me more than that she would be the best governor Arkansas ever had. Because no parent is ever jealous of his or her child's success. But more importantly, I love my state. I want it to do well. And nothing would thrill me more than if she just went into office and truly ended up being the very best governor the state ever had. You're blessed with great public officials here. I look at the extraordinary accomplishments you've done in Mississippi, and I just say, well done, good and faithful servants. Because you've moved your economy, you've moved health care. So many things are better in Mississippi than they were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I wouldn't underestimate the influence of the Farm Bureau in all of that. I would also tell you that one of the joys I have is that because, you know, when you've been governor of a state a long time, nobody thinks you're a big deal at all. And the introduction and all these nice things people said about me throughout the afternoon, man, I needed that. I really did. People say, are folks out there in the world as mean as you sometimes think they are in politics? I said, yeah, a few of them are. had a lady in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, see me at the gate at the airport. I was up there for a speech and getting ready to go home. And she recognized me, came over, got in my face, started telling me what an idiot I was, how that she could not believe that anybody would ever listen to me because my views were so draconian, so outdated, so ridiculous, so completely out of touch with the culture of the day. And she just went on and on. And I could tell what was going on. She was hoping so much that I would engage her in an argument. She wanted it. She needed it. And she was ready for me to just come back so she could come back and we could have a real go-round. And usually when those kind of things are happening, somebody's got a video camera standing over there with their iPhone. They're going to tape it, put it on social media, and tell everybody what a jerk Mike Huckabee was because he was yelling and arguing with this sweet lady. So she finished her tirade and stopped. And I'm sure she was ready for me just to tear into her. And I just looked at her and I smiled and I said, you know, it's funny you should say that stuff about me because my wife says the same thing about me every single day. She just looked dumbfounded and walked away. There was nothing else to say. Now, many of you may know that in one of my previous lives, I've had several, like a cat, 9 lives. One of them, I was a pastor, and a Baptist pastor, no less. There are a lot of Baptists in Mississippi. Somebody once said, everybody in Mississippi is a Baptist, except the ones that have moved in or been messed with. Everybody else is a Baptist down here. We know that's not true. But because of that, there were people who thought that folks like me should never get into politics. And I was in Malvern, Arkansas at the Brick Festival. Now, let me explain. Every Arkansas town has a festival every year to celebrate whatever it is about that community that is unique. And so Malvern has a brick factory, and they celebrate the brick. Folks, you know you live in a small town when you celebrate a brick. They celebrate a brick. And I was down there campaigning, and I had a lady come up to me. She says, I want to ask you something. Are you one of those narrow-minded Baptists who think only the Baptists go to heaven? I said, oh, no, ma'am, not at all. No, I'm more narrow than that because I don't think all the Baptists are going to make it, to be honest with you. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that the very first thing that you list, that you celebrate after 100 years, is faith. And I say this with all of my heart. There aren't many statewide organizations anywhere in this country that would unapologetically want to let the whole world know that we are not ashamed of being an organization that embraces faith, that we recognize God blessed America. And the reason this is so significant is because the wokeism of today has scared so many organizations and companies of even acknowledging the role that God has had in this country, much less pay the kind of open tribute that you have done here. And if there is no other reason for you to be absolutely excited about being Farm Bureau, it is that you are one of the few organizations in this country that still will stand and say, yes, we believe that there is a God, and we aren't here all by ourselves, and without him, we're toast. Thank God for you. Now, quite frankly, I know some people say, well, do you think you ought to wear your religion on your sleeve? I always want to know, where else would you wear it? What do you want to do? All be under the undercover business of faith somehow not being a part of our public lives? That's absurd. When a person is in the military, they wear their rank right there on their sleeve where everybody can know. Are they a corporal, private, sergeant, colonel, major, captain, general? If you're a general, you want everybody to know. And if you're a private, you might not want everybody to know because they'll all boss you around, but by golly, you still have to tell everybody who you are, what branch of service, and you proudly wear the flag of your country, a part of your uniform. You wear it on your sleeve. It's okay. Because to not do so, it means like, what, are you ashamed of it or something? And obviously, you're not ashamed of it. And because of that, I don't think the Lord is ashamed of you either. Now, I sometimes am just amazed when people are so afraid to openly declare, we believe. It doesn't mean we all believe exactly the same things. There are people here who are Baptists, who are Episcopalian Methodists, there are people who are Jewish, there are people who probably are Hindu or Muslim. Look, we're not going to have an argument here about what you believe. The beauty is that this is America, and you're free to believe it. And quite frankly, you're free not to believe anything. But you're not free to tell those of us who do believe that we have no place in this culture and in society, that we ought to sit down, shut up, and disappear and go away, because if it were not for people of faith, there would be no America, there would be no freedom, we would never have had the blessings that we've had in this country. There would not be a country unless God had chosen to breathe his blessing upon us, because if you think about it, when this country got started, it was a bunch of farmers and merchants and pastors who gathered the muskets off their mantle that were better suited for hunting varmints than starting a revolution. And these guys put themselves up against the greatest standing army in the history of the world. The British Army was not only the best equipped, the best trained, heck, they were the best dressed army in the history of the world. And they show up by the thousands. King George sends them over and says, put down this nonsense, this little rebellion going on over there in this startup country that thinks it's somebody. And boy, they thought they'd make quick work out of this. But what they underestimated, these folks that were pulling those mantles off their the muskets off their mantles, these folks weren't fighting just because they wanted more gold and silver in their pocket. They were fighting so that their children and their grandchildren could live in liberty. And they were willing to die in order for that to happen. And when you have a fight for a cause that you really believe in to that degree, there's no limit to what you can get done. I think we are in another fight for our liberty today. When government doesn't respect the rule of law, and government weaponizes itself to pick winners and losers, the very government that's only role is to be an impartial referee and to make sure everybody's playing by the same rules called the Constitution and law. But when those who are supposed to wear the striped shirts take those striped shirts of being an umpire off and start putting on a team jersey to cheer for one side over the other, then that country is in real trouble. And we are in real trouble today. And if it weren't for organizations like the Farm Bureau that sticks to the stuff that made us great, I'd worry. But I watch parents go to school board meetings when they say, we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to sit by and have someone in government tell us that we're supposed to just bring our kids, drop them off like laundry and dry cleaning and pick them up in the afternoon and raise no questions about what happens to them while they're there. And parents are saying, no, we're the moms and dads. Moms and dads raise children, governments don't. And that's what we must let the world know. Mississippi has given so much to the country, and one of the things I'm grateful for is lots of catfish. Look, I'm a Southern boy through and through. Iced tea, catfish, hush puppies, French fries, coleslaw, and tomato relish. It just doesn't get any better than that. If it does, I don't know what it'd be. Let somebody else have the caviar. I'll take the cornbread and the catfish every day and twice on Sunday, I tell you I will. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that you guys grow a lot of sweet potatoes. There's just no bad way to eat one. And they're good for you, too. All of you that make your living out of the resources of the earth, here's one of the things I've found. You care far more about the environment than the people who have never, ever walked through the marshlands, lifted a shotgun to the shoulder, and taken a shot of the mallard. Folks, I tell you, the first day in heaven is a flooded timber duck hunt. I don't know what else you think it's going to be. That's day one. But I'm always amazed at these concrete warriors, who think they love the environment more than the rest of us do, but they don't spend any time in it. They really don't understand it. They'll be dismissive of people who make a living on the farm or in the forest. They have no concept of the food and fiber industry. In fact, in New York City, they asked a group of children, sixth graders in New York City, where did milk come from? And over 65% of the kids in New York City said, when asked, where does milk come from? They said, the store. They had no idea that an animal was involved in getting milk to them. Folks, that's kind of scary, isn't it? Well, the fact is, there's three things a country has to be able to do in order to be free. These things make us free, keep us free. The absence of these three things, we have no freedom, and we lose our liberty. And the first is, to be free, a country has to be able to feed itself. Simple. If you depend upon some other country to bring the food to your table, then that country owns you. That country controls you. That particular economy will determine whether we live or die, because if they can decide whether or not there is going to be food on our table, we're their slave. And that's why the people who feed not just this country, but feed so much of the rest of the world, the farmers and the ranchers of this nation, are so much more important than they're ever given credit for, because without the food on the table that comes from the work of the people who live here, we lose our freedom is what we lose. First and foremost, we have to be able to feed ourselves. That's why I don't want there to be some catfish industry in Vietnam or South America that sends some fake catfish up here. It's not just a matter of state pride, because we got a lot of catfish in Arkansas. It's not that. It's because I don't want someone who does not love this country and salute our flag putting the food on our table when we know that if we ever cede that responsibility to somebody else, we will rue the day when we can no longer say that we are an independent and free people. We have to be able to feed ourselves. And then we better be able to fuel ourselves. That's right. If we don't produce our own sources of energy, we are slaves to whoever it is that's doing it. One of the things that I just do not understand is why there are so many people in politics who hate the American energy industry that could not only let us be absolutely energy independent, but be the greatest exporter of energy around the world, which means prosperity in America and a deep sense of, if not respect, outright fear of messing with us if they become dependent upon us instead of us becoming dependent upon them for energy needs, and we have the capacity to do it. We've got more than 500 years of energy under our own feet, that even if we didn't come up with any alternative forms, we could sustain ourselves even with the prediction of expected growth for the next 400 to 500 years. And instead of tapping into that, we go around begging people in Venezuela for their dirty oil instead of what we have under our own yards. What's wrong with us? This is insane. We must fuel ourselves. And we must fight for ourselves. Here's what I mean by that. We must be able to manufacture our own weapons of self-defense. If we no longer produce tanks and planes and the parts that keep them going, then whoever it is that's making those things, they control our freedom. I don't want them to control our freedom. Some of them don't like us very much. If there ever was a strong case to manufacture here in the United States, it's not just for economic benefit. Well, sure, there's a lot of economic benefit, better jobs, better wages, greater levels of taking our own ideas and technology and not having them stolen by the people who actually manufacture what we invented and created. But there's a better reason than that. Because if it ever comes time that we must absolutely defend our freedoms with the weaponry to defeat enemies that are trying to destroy us, we better know how to make them ourselves. Because I'd sure hate to place an order and hope Amazon can deliver the tanks, the planes, the arms and the weaponry and all of the ammunition and get it to us on Friday before we're struck by some enemy who hates us. It's not rocket science at all. It's common sense. The kind of common sense I've always found in the policies of the Farm Bureau, whether it's about taxes or agriculture, are quite frankly just about the fundamentals of property rights and liberty. And without property rights, there is no liberty. If we ever let the government tell us what we can and cannot do with our own property, we might as well just pull our flag down and say, we surrender, and put a white one up. But I don't sense it in places like this room. That's what you plan to do. I have a feeling if we started this event today with the national anthem, not a single person would take a knee. If you did, probably get clobbered by a chair, I'm just telling you. This is not the crowd I'd pull that in. I just don't think I would. I love this country, I really do. And my reason is quite frankly not philosophical, it's deeply personal. I don't want you to misunderstand why I am such an advocate for the America that I've grown up in. And it's not just because it's the theme of the day. It's because the American dream is not something I've read about or heard about. I've lived it. I grew up in a little shotgun orange brick just rent house on 2nd Street in Hope, Arkansas. My dad worked 2 jobs, and my mother worked, and all the paychecks put together barely paid the rent on that little shotgun rent house that I lived in. There was nothing about it that was anything but poverty-stricken. We didn't realize what poverty was then. We were never on a government program. We qualified, but my parents wouldn't have heard of it. And they just said, look, you're going to have to work hard. One of the things I'm grateful for, my parents were environmentalists before it was popular. You know, people act like they've discovered environmentalism. That's nonsense. My parents were environmentalists. Let me explain. We were into wind and solar long before anybody ever thought about it being an industry. But at our house, we just called it a clothesline. That's what we called it. It's how we dried our clothes. It was wind, it was solar, it was free. We put our wash out there. All of our neighbors could see all of our clothing and underwear. I mean, that's how we grew up. My dad used to tell me, he said, son, don't look very far up your family tree. There's some stuff up there you don't need to see. Of course, that made me curious, and I took a look, and I realized the old man was right. There's some stuff up there. My dad never finished high school, 10th grade, high as he got, which was higher than his father got. And my great-grandfather didn't finish high school, nor did his father before him or his father before him. Here's a just simple little fact. No male, not one single male in my entire family lineage upstream from me had ever finished high school, much less gone to college. When I was 8 years old, my dad said, son, the state's done built a lake down here, not far from where we are. And the governor's going to come down and dedicate it and make a talk. And I'm going to take you down there to hear the governor make that talk, because, son, you may live your whole life and you may never see a governor in person. I thought, boy, that must be a big deal to just get to see at a distance a governor in person. If somebody had told my dad, you know, your boy's one day going to live in the governor's mansion, and then your granddaughter's going to live in it too, not just as a little kid growing up in it, as she was, but she'll then occupy it as governor herself and be the first woman governor, and the first time in American history that a father and a daughter ever held the office of governor in the same state. You would never have convinced my father that that was going to happen or that it could happen, because he'd look at me and he'd say, that kid? So I grew up doing things some of you can relate to. If I needed a new baseball or a baseball glove or BBs from a BB gun, I didn't go to Dad and say, hey, Pops, can you spring some money? I need to go down and get some stuff. Didn't work like that in my house. I'd get a little wagon. I'd go around the neighborhood and collect Coke bottles and take them to the store and turn them in for the deposit till I had enough that I could buy some BBs. If I needed the baseball or a baseball glove, by the time I got 8, 9 years old, wasn't old enough to get a real job, you know, the kind where they take Social Security out and all that stuff. But a lot of us poor kids, we did get hired to catch chickens in the poultry houses around Hempstead County, Arkansas. Can I just tell you, if you've never caught chickens, people ask me, what was the biggest motivation in your life? Who was it that really influenced you to want to achieve things? I said, well, it really wasn't a person. It was the thousands and thousands of a bunch of smelly chickens that just motivated me to figure out I got to have a better life than this. Now, truth is, we were slave labor. I mean, we really were. There was no OSHA in those days. Didn't exist. And so they'd hire a bunch of us 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, and we'd go out 10 o'clock at night and catch chickens all night long and load them into these wooden crates that would be put on trucks and sent to Colonel Sanders so you guys could have a bucket of it on Sunday. And we'd cram those chickens in there. We got paid so much per chicken. 6 o'clock in the morning, we'd finally come out of there. We smelled so bad. I mean, it was horrible. And our mothers would make us strip off in the yard, hose us down, then we could go in and take a bath. It was a horrible, horrible way to make any money. But let me tell you what it did for me. As a kid, I'd come out of those chicken houses and I'd say, what do I have to do so I don't have to catch chickens for the rest of my life? Well, son, you're going to have to work hard, get a good education, treat people right. And by the time I was 9 years old, I said, I'm going to tell you one thing. I don't know what else is going to happen in my life, but I'm going to work hard, get a good education, and treat people right, because I'll be doggone if 67 years old, I'm going to be out catching chickens and putting them in a box. Do I consider myself deprived? No. A victim? Absolutely not. Do I consider myself somebody that didn't have it as good as others? I don't look at it that way at all. I feel I'm so incredibly blessed because this little kid who came out of nothing, lived in America. And I didn't just get out of high school. I got to go to college. I worked 40 hours a week to pay for it. Nobody else could. Nobody else would. I worked for it. And I paid for it. I didn't wait for somebody in Congress to pay off my student debt because I didn't have a student debt. I worked my butt off to get my education. I didn't need Uncle Sugar taking care of it. I learned the hard way, and the American way is that if you want something, you work hard and you pay for it. And these folks that want to say to these gender studies majors that now have $100,000 debt and they can't pay it off because the best job they can get serving coffee, nothing wrong with that. But my attitude is, I'll tell you what, we're not going to pay off your student debt, but we will enroll you in a school so you can learn to be a plumber, an HVAC technician, you can learn to be a finished carpenter or a brick mason where you can make some real money and you can pay off your own stinking, stupid student debt. That's what we can do for you. So, folks, our country is in trouble, and sometimes I get discouraged, but then I come to something like this, and I hang out with people like you, and I watch you as you boldly say, we're people of faith. We're people of family. We honestly believe that moms and dads raise the best kids, and it's not our job to turn over to the government. And I realize that every day you go out there and you depend upon God's good grace to give you enough decent weather to pull in a crop or to take care of the animals that are in your care and to put the food on the tables for the rest of us. And rather than being discouraged and ready to quit, it's folks like you that keep me fired up for freedom. And I just want to say, I hope 100 years from now, you're still firing up people in this country to love America, to love God, to love their families, and to live the life that every single person can be proud to live. Thank you, and God bless you and these great United States of America.